Hey, Allie, we are so excited to have you on the Power Women Wellness podcast. Please introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and we'll start there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone for listening and tuning in. So yeah, I'm Allie. I am one of the founders of Oat Haus. We're a food company. We make a product called Granola Butter. And I'm based in Philly, but I'm originally from San Diego. So I'm definitely a California girl at heart. And we moved here for the business, but I'm not gonna lie, it's been a little challenging because I miss the beach so much, but I go back, quite a bit. So I get my fix. Yeah. And I just live with my boyfriend. We've been together for like 8 or 9 years now. And he's actually one of my co-founders. So we can go into that whole thing too. Working together, living together. And yeah, I have a little dog named Squishy who's sleeping over here. That's pretty much me. Yeah, in a nutshell.
I love that. I've heard so many amazing things about San Diego. We have not gone. We've gone to like Laguna and that part of California. We've only been once, but I love California in general for the beaches because I grew up in Florida, which I think naturally people are like, oh, beautiful beaches. I did not grow up in like a part of Florida that had like all these beautiful beaches.
Yeah.
It's like right where the cruise ships were. And I don't know, it's just meh. I feel like maybe because I grew up there, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But I much prefer either like the west coast of Florida or like California beaches. They are like so beautiful, even though California is so cold. The water was freezing.
It's so cold. I know. And that's kind of the thing is like, everyone's like, oh, you grew up in San Diego, like you must surf all the time or be in the water all the time. And it's like in the summer, it's somewhat tolerable, but the rest of the year, like I just love being on the beach, walking on the beach, like just existing near the ocean. It's very grounding for me, but actually like being in the water, I'm such a wimp and I'm like, I hate cold water. So I actually am not like, I'm not a huge surfer or anything. Like obviously I grew up surfing and I know how to surf, but it's not, I don't live in the water. But if I was in Florida or Hawaii or like anywhere where it's warm, like I totally would. I'm just kind of a wimp in that way. So
okay, so that's like a year-round thing then. I thought maybe it was just the time of the year we went and it was cold water because I know people surf and they go out in the water. I don't know how.
Yeah, no, it's always pretty chilly. Like, I mean, in the summer, you'll get some moments where it's somewhat, a little bit warmer, but it's never like the Atlantic. It's never like Hawaii. Like, yeah, it's pretty chilly. So the guys that go out, they're usually in wetsuits and stuff. And I don't know how they do it like first thing in the morning, but it's not for me.
I don't either. But I'm so encouraged by your story. So I'd love for you to share like past health issues that like you really struggled with. I know you've been down a road of eating disorders, which actually kind of led you to this company that you have, which is amazing. So I'd love to hear more about it before we, dive behind the scenes of like what keeps you healthy and going and showing up for work. Cause I know a lot of people are encouraged by hearing people overcome certain health conditions and just being where you are now. It's just inspiring.
Oh, yes. No, thank you so much. I mean, I love sharing my story and I know, eating disorders and anything like that sometimes can feel a little bit taboo, but for me, it really, I mean, number one, it is part of my journey and it's how the business came to be. So I'm just really grateful that I actually went through all of that. I wasn't at the time, I was like, I hate this. But now I can look back on it and be like, okay, this led me to where I am. So first of all, like I'm very open about everything. And then I talk about it all the time because I also felt when I was going through it, I was so alone. I felt like no one was really talking about it. This was like even like the wellness era. And so I felt like people weren't even really talking about like healthy eating or, anything related to food. And I also didn't look like I had an eating disorder. And I like to talk about that a lot, how eating disorders don't have a look and they're often like, a huge spectrum. Sometimes, people may just have certain issues with food, but they're not like super, super deep in an eating disorder. And so I think that term is kind of, people usually call it disordered eating. I know it's like play on words, but but it's a huge spectrum. Like for me, I was restricting and binging. So my weight actually fluctuated pretty drastically. And there was times where I was, at a higher weight. And so someone would never look at me and think like, oh, she has an eating disorder by any means. So I just like to say that because that kept me stuck for a long time where I felt like, okay, I don't look like someone who has an eating disorder. So, I must not be doing it right. I must not be eating healthy enough. Like, and it kept me from seeking treatment. So that was another kind of thing that I like to touch on. But anyways, that was a tangent. But back to my story. Yeah, grew up in San Diego, obviously very sort of health conscious. Everyone's always in bathing suits at the beach. Like my whole family was very athletic. My parents literally met at a running club in La Jolla, in San Diego. And like my dad has done like 6 Ironman triathlons, like just very athletic people, which is great. And like, they're very healthy. But I think growing up in that environment combined with just societal pressures for women and also me kind of being this like type A perfectionist was almost like this perfect storm. And so I grew up playing volleyball, which, you wear the tiny little like spandex shorts. And I just remember looking at my body and comparing it to my teammates. And for people who don't know like volleyball positions, I was the libero, which basically just means I was like the shortest person on the team. And you're just like a back row defender. And because of that, I was surrounded by all of my teammates were at least like 5'11", 6 foot, right? And I'm like 5'4", 5'5". And so, when you're in that age, that kind of middle school, high school age, and these girls are this tall, like usually they're pretty thin because they kind of shot up, with growth spurts.
Yeah.
And so, here I am kind of surrounded by all these like very tall, lanky, almost like, I don't even want to say like Victoria's Secret model body, but like that was kind of the vibe of just this like willowy, body type. And so I was surrounded by that. And I think in my mind, I was just like, I don't look like them, and I don't have a thigh gap. And it was like all this kind of toxic diet culture that was, just infiltrating my brain at a very early age. So that's when sort of my issues with food started. And they lasted, for about a decade. So I ended up studying nutrition in college. And it was for all the wrong reasons. It was like totally fear-based. I was like, oh, maybe if I learn as much as possible about nutrition, I'll be able to just like, control my body, control what I eat. And so a lot of it was just from a place of fear. Unfortunately, it wasn't like a passion for nutrition or anything. That's what I told people. And then, that continued all through college. I went to school up in the Bay Area. And then fast forward, I graduate, I'm working in San Francisco in tech. And I'm still just really plagued by this like restrict binge cycle. And for me, what I struggled with mostly was orthorexia, which is an obsession with eating perfectly clean all the time. It's almost like healthy eating taken to the extreme.
Yeah.
And for people listening who've never struggled with food, like this might sound like, oh, that sounds great. Like you ate healthy all the time, like especially for people who are trying to eat healthier. But I really describe it to people as like, it's almost like OCD, this like compulsive, it's like if you're out to eat at a restaurant and there's not, say like I was going to order the kale salad because that was like, fit in my mind as this like healthy or good food. And the waiter was like, oh, sorry, like we're out of that or it's unavailable. A normal person would be like, okay, like I'll order something else. But for me, it was like, oh my, like panic, oh my gosh. And just kind of these like spiraling thoughts and stress and anxiety. And so it was just this mental prison, that I had created for myself. And I think that's sort of where that fine line is of like eating healthy is something that adds value to your life. And this is really almost like a trapped, I felt cornered by my own food rules. So at a certain point, because, I'm exhausted just telling you this, obviously you can imagine like how exhausting it was living in that for so long. And so I finally reached this rock bottom where I was like, I just need to make a change. I don't know what that is, but like how I'm living is not working for me. And, I was in my early mid-20s. Like I was supposed to be having the time of my, freaking life in San Francisco. And here I am just like afraid to even go out to eat. It was just really sad. And so I ended up reaching out for help. And I worked with this amazing woman who, was a nutritional therapist, really just changed the way that I saw food. Because I was so focused on this very black and white view of food where it was only just, calories, grams, macros, like this very sort of rigid mindset. And so she really shifted, and I kind of unlearned a lot of these rules that I had really just clung to for so long. And so part of my eating disorder recovery was actually reintroducing my fear foods back into my diet. And that's where granola butter came from or came out of because, peanut butter, almond butter, a lot of these nut butters that are super delicious. At the time, I was afraid to eat them. And so, I cut them out for a really long time. So as I started to add them back in, I just had a hard time digesting them. I mean, as you can imagine, my gut health, my body was like
Oh yeah.
not great, from just years of treating myself like trash. And so my nutritionist was like, well, in the meantime, like, let's just experiment with some nut-free spreads. Maybe the nuts are a little too dense for your body to digest right now. And so I had never tried nut-free spreads. And I was like, because I'm not allergic. So I was like, okay, sure. So I tried the sunflower seed butter, the soy nut butter, and it was like, again, nothing against these companies. Like, I'm sure people like them, but I was like, holy shit, like these are so bad. And I don't even have allergies. And I'm like, how are people, supposed to eat these? Like, that's so sad. And so I was just kind of pissed, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be stuck eating these. So I got to work. I was in this like mad scientist, headspace in my tiny San Francisco kitchen. And I'm like just throwing shit in my Vitamix. I'm like, what can I turn into a butter? What can I turn into a spread? And then I just had this epiphany and this idea to do, to try out oats, because it was 2017, Oatly and oat milk was sort of coming on the scene. And it was this like very novel idea. Everyone's like, milk out of oats, that's crazy. So then of course I'm like, well, what if I did a spread out of oats? So that's where the idea came from. So again, like, I'm very proud to share my story, because while it was, 10 of the worst years of my life, it did lead me to something that I'm so passionate about today. And that's, our company. Yes, we're a food company, but it's really just the platform to help people find joy and love and fun with food. I think
Oh yeah.
healthy eating has become sort of like rigid and even stressful for some people. So we're trying to encourage people, like, yes, you can nourish your body, but like, it also can be playful. It can be light, it doesn't have to be this significant, heavy thing all the time. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, even though we work with a lot of people who are in like those healing seasons where there has to be like more like rules, so to speak, like you have had parasite or whatever. But once we get out of that, it is like something we have to like say, hey, you can have your favorite things like you. And I'm so grateful for companies like Oat Haus that have, for people who are a little bit more sensitive or allergic to certain things, they can still enjoy like their favorite things. Like we love Susie's muffins. Like there's so many companies that just recreate all of our favorites, but it just, not saying that you should have guilt when you eat something like normal. I still have Domino's pizza like at a birthday party and people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, y'all, it's like not that big of a deal. But to be able to have something just in your pantry, because we're all like team, like what you bring home, should be mostly nourishing, and to have fun, like companies like yours that just, it's killer ingredients. It tastes so good. Like I told you before, we have to hide it because everyone just loves it. And then when I want to go to eat it, it's gone.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is unfair.
No, I love that point too, of like, cause I also have Hashimoto's, which is a, thyroid autoimmune. So I've been through all the, protocols, and obviously like, I think there is a time and a place for that for sure. But yeah, I think where it, maybe people have issues is when they either like stay in that strict place for too long and they're afraid. And I get it. It's like, when you, I guess, eat a certain way or you remove something, you start feeling better, then you're afraid to add it back in. But yeah, I think that's the reason why our products, and I tell people, it's like, they just so happen to be allergen free. They just so happen to not have XYZ, because I don't want to lead with that of like, hey, eat this because it's gluten free. It's like, eat this because you love the taste, eat this because, it makes your body feel good. And then those things can be kind of like a bonus, but
yeah. Oh, for sure. And I would say my favorite one is the cookie dough flavor.
Yes.
Fire. I was adding them to my smoothie for a little bit because I'm like, this just makes it cookie dough vibe.
Nice. Oh my God, love that.
So I know that with eating disorders, there's a lot of like mental health that comes with that. So do you do anything daily for your mental health that is almost like a non-negotiable? Like you have to do it. It makes you feel so good, starts the day right, or in the evening, morning. What are some of your favorite mental health tools that you use?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, starting this business, it's funny. It's like, it's been being an entrepreneur, and any job really, just adulting is difficult, but this business has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, my itty bitty 30 years of living. And I think it's really forced me, actually, because it's been so difficult, not to like again, tie it back into the business, but it's forced me to really pay attention to my mental health because, in the beginning, all I was doing, obviously the beginning stages of anything, like if you're a mom or if you're a business owner, like the beginning is always the hardest because you're not in your groove and you're trying to figure things out.
You're winging it.
Yeah, you're winging it. Oh my God, you're like faking it till you make it. And my mental health really, really took a hit because I just was isolating myself and I was working all the time and I was just burned out, honestly. So now we're about 4 years into the business. I feel a really good groove where, don't get me wrong, like I work like a dog, like I work all the time, but I set really firm boundaries in the mornings, in the evenings, and I also go to therapy weekly. So I found a few things that really work for me, and everyone's different, as you and I both know. Things that really work for me, like non-negotiables are, I work from home mostly. So this is extra important because as people who work from home know, like it can just bleed into life and all of a sudden you're working like all day long. So I really set my work hours, it's like 9 a.m. to, again, like sometimes it gets a little bit later than others. Like this week we're launching a new flavor. So I might be working a little bit later, but I really try to like have that firm cutoff. And then before I start work, it's like movement for me in the morning is essential. As I know a lot of people, it's really helpful. I also have to be careful though, because I have a tendency to get sort of, with my past, I used to like exercise to burn off what I ate the night before and sort of all these like fear-based movement from a place of like fear. And so now I really just do what I love. Like I figured out I love weightlifting because it makes me feel strong, capable, like a badass. And I love walking with like a podcast because that just like feels more just like a mental health practice. So I wake up that morning and I'm not rigid of like I have to do a leg day today, because in the past that hasn't served me. So like I really wake up and I'm intuitive about it. Like this morning I was super sore and I was like, all right, I'm going to go for a walk outside. I'm going to listen to some music and I'm going to stop walking when I am done and when I don't feel like walking anymore. So that kind of keeps it fun and light and not so heavy. Second thing is I really try, again, the key word here is try, not to go on social media or like even check my phone the first hour of the day. Again, like I'm not perfect by any means, but I do find when I do that, like I'm just in a better mental space the rest of the day. I'm not as reactive. I'm more, kind of just calm and grounded. So that's something I try to do, but it's hard. And what helps me with that is I have an actual alarm clock and I keep my phone downstairs. So like not in my bedroom. Because I know a lot of people, it's like first thing you roll over and you look at your phone, and even just that little bit of separation, like physical separation, I keep it charging in another room. That helps. And then with therapy, I see my talk therapist 1 week and I alternate. And then the next week I see my somatic therapist. And basically, somatic therapy is just like body-based therapy. So I, recently shared about this on my Instagram, but I about 10 years ago had experienced a sexual assault, and really for a long time, that combined with my eating disorder, I just felt like I was so disconnected from my body. I held a lot of like emotions and feelings in my body. I had a hard time like processing feelings. So somatic therapy has been so helpful in that because it really just teaches you, that feelings aren't bad. They're just, energy, and they're just moving through your body and they don't last forever. So that's been really helpful for me as well. So I alternate between those every Wednesday. And then my nighttime routine, I don't really have one. Again, I try not to be like too rigid with any of this because it can become obsessive. So I usually, again, working with my partner, like we really have to make time to remember like, hey, we're romantic partners too. Like we're not just business partners. And that's been such an evolution for us. And so I think what helps now too is, we have a facility, we have a office that's, I mostly work from home and then he goes into the office. So it sort of is that like routine of like, he comes home, I like close my computer and then we have dinner together and watch a show or whatever we want to do. But it's like, we really try to connect at night because we don't really, the days are so crazy hectic. But yeah, that's it. Nothing too crazy. And I think another big takeaway for me is like incorporating as much fun and kind of joy throughout my day as possible and pleasure. Like I think as women, we have we're just more susceptible to feeling guilty for, taking time for ourselves, feeling pleasure. So little things, and pleasure doesn't have to be sexual. Like for me, eating a croissant that brings me so much pleasure. So like I'll make espresso and a croissant for breakfast most mornings. And like, that just brings me so much joy. And I think for a long time, I felt like, I had to earn things, or I had to, it's like, the working out thing. It's like, oh, I had to earn a croissant. It's like, no, like you inherently deserve it because, you're just a cool human.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it brings you joy. So that's something else, is just incorporating little bits of joy into my day.
Yeah. I know sometimes when, all these reducing stress techniques that we talk about, because obviously stress is so important to control, because you can eat right, you can you can do everything correct, but if you're still stressing, that will absolutely still, bring you down and cause health issues and all of that. And so when someone asks like, okay, well, how do you reduce stress? And there's obviously journaling, there's so many techniques you can do. But honestly, like the thing is that you need to do is just to do something you enjoy. And whether that be something very simple like knitting, scrapbooking, reading a book, going on a walk, whatever that is, it's just incorporating that. And I feel like everyone's always looking for that unicorn ticket of like, this is how I'm going to bring more joy into my day by doing this this thing. And I'm like, no, it's just do something you enjoy. I think we've just lost a lot of fun, which obviously we have a lot to do. I know this podcast is geared towards women that are very career driven entrepreneurs. I get it. I love what I do. So I honestly don't even feel like it's work, and you might feel the same way because you love what you do and you love the product you create. So it doesn't feel like work, but at the same time, it still can be very mentally taxing, and we still have to separate and know that there's life outside of work.
100%. No, I had this huge realization recently about that too. Cause I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I'm creating this company. Like, our whole mission and vibe is like helping people have fun and play. And I'm like, here I am, never having fun, like never, I'm like, the irony is not lost on me. But I think what it is too, is like, we're, the whole wellness space, like as great as it is, I think it's sort of made us feel this pressure of like, never ending self-optimization, right? And so it's like Tim Ferriss vibe of like always biohacking and always doing this. It's like if you're folding laundry, you better be listening to a podcast at the same time. And it's like I feel that pressure too. And so sometimes I look at myself and I'm like, when was the last time I did something just for shits and giggles, like just for the fun of it? And if I can't think of a time recently, I'm like, okay, I need to do that because I get very hung up in like the productivity hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And it feels good to be productive, but it also, you have to feed your soul and just sometimes do things just for the joy of it, not to accomplish anything, So yeah, I have to work on that as well.
For sure. I definitely have seasons where I'm like on podcast kicks or audible kicks where I'm just listening. And then like I'll crash in the sense of like, I don't want to listen anymore. I really just don't listen to anything, or just listen to music, or just listen to something fun and not just always be driving home information. And I know I start my doctorate this fall. I'm an education nerd. So I love learning. And I was like, heck, what's 2 more years and getting my doctorate in nutrition? I mean, it's a a bucket list kind of thing. So when people ask me like, well, what are some good like health books you love to read? And I'm like, honestly, I read textbooks. And so because I'm just so ingrained in that, by the time I can read a book, it's not going to be health. It's not going to be business. It's going to be romance fiction books where I can escape into this really sexy relationship. Okay.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. No, escaping is so good for your brain. And I think what also is interesting is like, with social media and like even you're waiting in line at the grocery store and it's like you look around, everyone's on their phones. Like we don't give ourselves time to be bored anymore. Or like I remember, growing up when I was little, like being on a road trip and looking out the car window and just daydreaming and my brain, kind of letting it just go wherever. And like we don't let ourselves do that anymore. And so I think my therapist always tells me like, Allie, rest is productive, because it's true. Like, especially as a creative, when I'm constantly consuming either podcasts or whatever it is, like I'm not coming up with original ideas. I'm just consuming other people's ideas and regurgitating them in different ways. So it's actually really important for me to have rest and to not, to really just have that downtime, because that's when original ideas can come up. And it's helpful for anyone who's in a creative space.
For sure. And I feel that way even with social media. Absolutely. Like when I'm on it or I'm just looking at reels and see what other people are doing, it one gets you in comparison trap, at least for me. So I have to just make sure I monitor how much that is. And then two, like you said, like I then kind of get lost and like, well, what am I doing? And then it just spirals from there. And I know everyone's spirituality is different, but I know for me, I feel like I don't get to connect on the spiritual side and with God when I am busy brained. And I feel like he only speaks to me when I'm quiet brained. And so I've even noticed that sometimes with walking, and when I'm out of podcast or I'm out of like, and I'm just doing music, but I kind of get out of that, I'm like, let me just walk in silence.
Yes.
And that feels weird because everyone has their headphones in when they're walking, but I'm like, I'm wanting the silent walk.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I know the silent walk is so powerful. And it is weird because you first go out and you're like, this is too quiet. What do I think about? And then, yeah, it's so nice to do that once in a while.
For sure. So I know you mentioned you had a coffee and a croissant. What are some other like favorite like meals that you love to go to? They're super simple. I know being busy, like I love to stick to like eggs, and I'll switch it up between like a gluten-free bagel or sometimes just toast or sometimes fruit. I like to switch it up. But do you have any like staples that you always turn to, breakfast, lunch, dinner, for just the crazy times?
Yes. So yeah, I've been cooking a little bit more lately. I actually used to, so when we went on Shark Tank this past season, and during that time, filming and all that was really crazy. So I actually signed up for like a meal delivery, just a local one in Philly, and they delivered like my lunch and dinners Monday through Friday. And it was so nice. I'm not gonna lie. Like I thought it was just gonna be a temporary thing. And I kept using them for like probably almost a year, because I was just like, it was so nice during the work week, just reaching into my fridge, not having to think about cooking. And I'll admit I got a little bit lazy, and then I kind of got sick of like, the same food over and over. So I was like, and I do miss cooking. It does bring me joy, especially working from home. So now I'm back to cooking, but what makes me feel good, and it's been such a journey with like obviously my history, but then also just experimenting like what resonates with me. Like I've tried being, plant-based because that was like trendy for, or I guess it is. And what works for me personally is just balancing protein, healthy fats, carbs. Like I know it sounds so boring and basic, but when I have a good balance of that, like my blood sugar feels stable, and I'm very sensitive to like blood sugar spikes, even caffeine. I drink decaf espresso, as like lame as that sounds, because like
that's not lame at all. I'm
like very sensitive to caffeine, so I think I'm just like a little delicate dandelion with that. So I always try to just make sure I have some sort of balanced plate. But again, like I try not to get too rigid. Like for lunch today, I got these really yummy like mushroom chicken sausages. So I just sauteed those, and then some lentils, some Parmesan. What else I have? An apple.
That sounds good.
I kind of just like throw stuff together that's like quick, protein, but I try not to stick or like to any dogma, or, I don't to any like particular diet. And then, what's interesting too, speaking of the stress thing. So with Hashimoto's, you're technically, a lot of people say you're supposed to be gluten-free, dairy-free. And I was very strictly both of those for quite some time. And then I just realized, I'm going to just try to eat everything and just see what happens. Because my antibodies, as I was being super strict, dairy-free, gluten-free, my antibodies kept climbing, and I was doing everything. I was, all the wellness things. I have an infrared sauna in my house. I have, no, seriously, I'm looking at it right now. I have a infrared light, like,
me too.
I have like all the gadgets, and I just felt like I was, like you said, I was checking all these boxes. And what I think I was doing was like stressing myself out more, because I was trying, like my morning routine was like, so many steps, and I'm doing the celery juice, whatever. So finally I kind of went the other way, where I was like, F this, like I'm going to just eat my croissant. That brings me joy. I'm going to eat dairy. I live next door to a Jenny's ice cream. Like I'm going to get ice cream when I want and just see what happens. Like my antibodies are already going up, so I don't really have anything to lose. And I swear that was the only thing I changed, was I just ate whatever I wanted. And again, I think a huge component was the stress thing. And my doctor was like, I don't know what you did, but your antibodies are going down for the first time in years. And I was like, no effing way. Like this is incredible. Crazy. So again, I think, and not to tell everyone like eat croissants and ice cream forever. Whatever works for you. But for me, like, again, I think the stress piece is diet is important, but it's your overall, like, do what makes you happy, because your body does respond to that, I think.
Yeah.
And, looking at people that live in Europe, like these Italians, like they eat pasta, but they're also like, they drink wine, but it's with their, community. And it's like this kind of, yeah, just the stress piece I think is really important. So,
It's
um,
huge. I mean, I would say like, again, you can have perfect diet, but if your stress is just out of this world, you will have blood sugar issues. Like I see people who are pre-diabetic, honestly, some people that are diabetic per like low carb, even though technically I would argue against that because I think at one point it's again might be good for healing, but long term having just the flexibility is so important. But they're doing all the right things.
mhm,
The only thing that's off is stress. And whether that's like work induced, relationship induced, trauma that they just need to work through, that's kind of coming into present day. That is like the golden ticket. And
yeah.
it is so huge. And I definitely, I go through ebbs and flows too. Sometimes my routines are on point, sauna, red light, all that. And then sometimes if I'm feeling just overwhelmed, it's just a busy season and just trying to shove it all in, it absolutely turns into more of like a stress checklist. And it's just not worth it. So I have to like back off and just say, whatever feels good today, like that's what we're doing.
Yes, and I think that okay, yeah, that's like the fine line, because it's like such a nuanced thing, right? Where it's like, I'm not saying that if you eat croissants and ice cream, you're like your health gonna magically improve, but I think it's the intention behind it, because I used
Hmm.
to approach like health from a very fear-based place, and now you're
Yeah.
right. It's like I go to the gym in the morning, and like when I lift weights, it's just medicinal for me, because I'm like, yes, like I want to be doing this. I'm not doing
Yep.
this because I have to.
I
So I
get
think
to.
that's I get to, yeah. So you're right. I think it's a very, it's just like your intention behind it, and that whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my little experiment that I've been trying
That's hilarious.
recently, and I know it's been so funny. And I think the last thing I'll say too is like really being intuitive with yourself, because if I told myself, okay, well now I'm just eating everything, so I'm gonna have a croissant every single day, like I wake up some mornings and like that doesn't sound good to me, even though it does bring me joy, where I'm like, no, my body's craving some vegetables, or it's craving some nutrients. So I think that also helps, is kind of being intuitive and flexible, and kind of listening to what your body needs that day.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have a favorite protein that you always rely on? I know mine is like eggs. That's like my go-to in the morning because it's so quick. But do you have a favorite protein that you just love having, whether it be seafood, chicken, eggs?
Yeah, I love eggs. I'll do that. Sometimes I'm usually in such a rush in the morning. I'll do like just a protein, like a smoothie
Nice.
protein powder. I have been working, so I'm about to freeze my eggs, or I guess embryos, with my partner this fall. So I've been working with a naturopath who's like got me on, a bunch of supplements for egg health, or I don't know.
Yay.
So like CoQ10, all those things. So I feel like in the morning I do, my smoothie, and I do all the I've been trying like the seed cycling, where I do like, I don't know,
Yeah.
for your site, for your hormonal cycle. We'll see. I don't know if it's like just placebo, but
I
um
see both. I see people who like love it. And then I see people who like, I personally never really felt anything while doing it. I
yeah.
think it was fun. It was a fun way to just make sure I was getting like these diverse seeds and getting them in
Yeah.
regularly. But yeah, I symptom wise never, I know I didn't really have that much going on at all to even say that like, oh yeah, it helped me do this. But I didn't see anything crazy come out of it. But I think it's a
Yeah.
fun little thing to do.
Yeah, totally. So it's like another experiment. But yeah, I go through phases. It also depends on the weather. Like being from San Diego, it was like, yeah, you can have smoothie bowls like all year long, But now that I'm in Philly, oh my gosh, yeah, like, it's so hot here. So smoothie just sounds good every day. And then in the winter, I'm sure I'm gonna be like, no, I'm, freezing. Give me all the warm goodness. So yeah, it just changes on depending on the day and my mood.
That's too funny. Oh my gosh, it's so exciting about freezing your eggs. I know you mentioned you're 30. I'm 30. So I had kids really young. So I was like 17 when I had my son. So he went to middle school today.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. And then my daughter's I'm going into third grade. So motherhood is just so fun and awesome. And so it's exciting that that's in your near
Yes.
future.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's one of those things that I was really unsure of for a long time, just like I mean both motherhood and freezing my eggs. But I think, it's just such a safety net having them frozen, and
For
especially with
sure.
Hashimoto's, like, kind of affects your fertility. And so luckily I did the whole panel and everything looked good. And especially with like the eating disorder stuff, I was like, oh no, hopefully that didn't affect
Yeah,
anything. And I was very lucky that it didn't. But yeah, I think just the business has been, my partner and my baby, so to speak, for so long. But I just would never, I'd hate to look back one day when it's like, oh, it's too late. Or they really say that, the earlier you freeze your eggs, the better, even
for
though
sure.
when you're in your 20s, that's like the last thing you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so we're just going to do it. But
yeah, and under that pressure, under that time clock, because unfortunately women, we do have a time clock. Men don't, but women do. So it's nice that you can release that off. You're like, oh my gosh, if I want kids, I better do now.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm super excited about that whole thing. And then, yeah, with motherhood, like I had a very, I don't know, I just never felt this like maternal instinct that I feel like, I don't know, some women, it's like, oh, I can't wait to be a mom. I never felt that. And I actually had this like really profound psychedelic experience. I've, never did psychedelics before. And I did it for healing, in a therapeutic guided setting. And I just had this really deep, just full body knowing that I'm just going to be
Wow.
a great mom. And it was just this like confirmation, and yeah, just like, I don't know, just this
Wow.
confidence that I needed, because I felt like, I had a really kind of different role model with my own mom. And so, just sort of that experience was, I think, different than most. And so, yeah, I just never really knew what that looked like being a mom. And so, yeah,
Wow.
anyway, so I'm very excited, but it's going to be, the egg freezing journey, I know, is hard with all the shots and stuff. So,
Yeah, for sure. So tell us, do you have a favorite book that you've read lately, whether it's like self-development or also fun books, but any book that you've read?
oh my gosh, yeah, I read a lot. I read probably, oh my gosh, like more than any. I've always loved to read.
Me
Um,
too.
and so I'm like just always reading. But one that I really loved, like I really, with this, healing journey, as like cliche as that sounds, that I've sort of embarked on in the last like year or so, I feel like I've really been in this like, yeah, more spiritual side. I've never been like a spiritual person, but just exploring the more like woo-woo side
Yeah.
of myself, I feel like has been such a journey. So Untethered Soul is like
Okay.
the holy grail. I love that book. Many Lives, Many Masters is another one, which it's really interesting. It talks about past lives and
Ooh.
sounds very woo, but it's from the perspective of like a Western, like an MD psychiatrist. And he
Okay.
kind of like, it's from the perspective of him basically seeing, all these patients and just having this like inexplicable, reason for all of these like crazy things happening. And anyway, so that's a really good book. Body Keeps the Score is a great one. That's for like anyone who's gone through any sort of trauma, and kind of explains how trauma affects your brain and body.
Mm,
And then the last one is such a classic. It's The Four Agreements. And that just, I think, is like such a nice little quick, easy read. Just like a nice guide to life. And so I reread that
nice.
one a lot, but it's like one of them is like, I think it's either it's not personal or it's never about you, but basically it's like everyone's, anything that happens or if someone reacts a certain way, it's like, it's never personal. It's someone coming to an
Yeah.
experience with their own filter, their own
Oh,
lens, their own experiences. So that's helped me a lot, especially in business or, living my life publicly online. Like you get a lot of hate, you get a lot of trolls, not a lot, but like the ones that come
they're
out,
there.
they just stick out in your mind. And that bothered me for a long time. I'm such a just real, like vulnerable person that, sharing my life, it can be,
Yeah.
pretty, yeah, just a vulnerable place to be. And so when someone comes, when the trolls come out of the woodwork, yeah, it can be hurtful, but I think that helped a lot, just
Yeah.
feeling like, they're hurting or it's something, it's not about me. And so, yeah,
Yeah. It's
mhm.
so true. And I would say that's been like really key for me to understand people who may, yeah, respond in such a rude way or just an off-putting way. And I always think, and I actually used to do this when I used to be a manager at Aldi before when I was on my undergrad and all that. And I remember we'd get some really rude customers. And I
Mhm.
just remember thinking like, man, they could have just been diagnosed with cancer today, or just
Yeah.
someone in their family died. Like usually there's a reason for someone to respond that way. And it's just like, you gotta love them regardless. And just know that, yeah, it's not you. Don't take it personal. But I totally feel that.
So true. Yeah. Mhm.
Do you have a favorite podcast that you love to listen to?
Oh yeah, let's see. Oh my gosh, I listened to a mix of some wellnessy ones. I mean, I love like Huberman Lab. He's a little more sciencey, but I love him. Um, let's see. I listened to some business ones. The like New York Times, The Daily, just for like to keep me up to date. I don't like to keep the news, just running in the background. So I feel like it
Me
drives up
too.
my anxiety. So
Me
I'm like, if I
too.
can get just like a quick rundown of like any of those quick like news ones. What else?
Yeah, do
Yeah,
you have a favorite business one?
let's see. Business one.
Or
I'm trying to
entrepreneur?
think. I mean, I love how I built this, but I will say, like, I take that with a grain of salt because I think I used to listen to it a lot more in the beginning of my business, but it kind of like pisses me off now because it's like all of these entrepreneurs that have just like made it and they're like, yeah, they're just looking at their whole business with like rose-colored glasses and I don't know, it's just this very like rosy recap of like starting
That's a
a
lie.
yeah. And
That's
so
a
for me,
lie.
being like in the trenches, I'm like, come on, give it to me real. Like, I remember
Yes.
listening to, I think it was like the Allbirds one or something. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. We just like launched this thing and then it just like blew up. And then I don't know, it was like just this so laissez-faire attitude. And I'm like, come on, like this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, why are you acting like it was a walk in the
I'm
park?
gonna say, I mean, maybe that's happened, but I'm with you. I definitely think that there are always ups and downs. And if they're just sharing the ups, I'm like, no, there is something, and then you just don't want
Yeah.
to share it. I value authenticity. So if I like sense that there's like some unauthentic or no one's being like honest or just real, like that's why my husband jokes, he's like, well, like no one can get through a conversation with you without talking about like poop or sex. I'm like, yeah, because we're all doing it. So like, why can't we just
Totally.
talk about it and normalize these things are like taboo when we're all human and we all experience it?
Oh my God. Oh my God. And it's just, yeah, it just makes you more relatable too. Like, so yeah. So
So
that
I'm
one,
with you.
yeah, that one I don't know. So I don't listen to as much, but I mean this probably isn't as interesting for your listeners, but I listen to a lot of food industry podcasts. So like Taste Radio. Um
Okay.
yeah, so like those one like I think it's called Brand Builder, but they basically interview other food entrepreneurs. So that's interesting for me
Oh,
just to talk
awesome.
about like, things that work for them and like Facebook ads and like boring stuff like that. But
I think that's one of my favorite things is learning about other industries. Like like I have a friend who's a romance writer, like just learning how other industries like work and how they're built and what they do is so fascinating to me.
yeah, it is. It's super, and the food industry is super interesting because like when I was a consumer, I had no idea, you kind of just walk the aisles of Whole
Yeah.
Foods and you're like, oh, these brands like must be killing it. They're at Whole Foods. Like,
Yeah.
one fun fact, for example, is like retail is so expensive for brands. And it's actually like, especially when you just launch in retail, you're probably losing money. Especially like if you
Really?
launch into a big retailer like Target or Walmart, yeah, you probably have to like raise a round of funding before you do that because it's that expensive to be on shelves. So that was kind of
Wow.
a fun fact that I didn't realize until starting this business.
Wow. See, I love learning that stuff, even though
Mhm.
it's like nothing to do with me. I'm just like, I'm fascinated that those are the
Yeah.
things. Cause again, I walk the shelves and I just see, oh, that looks good.
Yeah.
And exactly, they're killing it if they're in here. And you just
Yeah.
don't see all the behind the scenes, which, really makes me appreciate like companies like you more, especially knowing like the founder and the story and like what built it and all that. So how can we support you? We appreciate you taking the time to share your journey with us. And like, I just love how intuitive your whole routines are. And I wouldn't even say they're routines. It's just like whatever
Yeah.
feels best for your body. So how can we support you? Where can we find you? I know I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yes. Yeah. I know. I hope that was helpful. I feel like the whole time I'm just like, yeah, I just do what feels good. um, yeah, you can find me. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me and listening. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram is probably easiest. My handle is just my name. So it's just Ali Bonar, ALIBONAR. And then our brand is called Oat Haus and it's HAUS. And our Instagram handle there is just oat.house. And then, yeah, we're sold at Whole Foods, Sprouts, Harris Teeter, Thrive Market. There's more on our site, but our website, Amazon. So yeah, you can
Nice.
just probably Google granola butter and we'll pop up.
Yeah, you guys will definitely pop up. So
Yeah.
we'll end with a lightning round questions where it's just like 5 or 6 questions, either or you can just choose really quickly. So the first one is burgers or tacos?
Oh, San Diego girl, tacos.
Austin here, so tacos. Guac or salsa?
Guacamole.
Night or morning?
Morning.
Lose sleep or skip a meal?
Oh, lose
I know
sleep.
it's
You
painful.
never skip a meal. Yeah.
Me too.
Both of those are hard. Yeah.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
And plans or surprises?
Surprises.
Oh, I like to live
Yeah.
life on the wild side.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Awesome. Well,
Yes.
thank you, Allie, for coming on today.
Thank you. This was so fun.